I know that I've been posting a lot of movie reviews on this channel in the past couple weeks, and if you're subscribed to this channel, I apologize for spamming your feed. But this should be the last one, at least for a while. The wife and kids are coming back tomorrow, so no more peace and quiet for me in which I can sit around on the couch and watch movies. It's back to taking care of the kids. So I was thinking, one more day to myself, maybe I could sneak in one more movie. Which movie do I want to watch? Now, I've also been listening to the Revolutions podcast by Mike Duncan. And if you've been watching this channel, you'll know I've been reviewing it season by season. I'll link to my playlist in the description down below. But I'm currently on season 9, The Mexican Revolution, in which they're talking about Pancho Villa. Sorry, by they, I mean Mike Duncan. Mike Duncan's talking a lot about Pancho Villa. And I'm listening to this description about Pancho Villa, who really comes through as a fascinating character in this podcast. And it occurred to me that all I know about Pancho Villa was what I learned some 30 years ago from young Indiana Jones and the Curse of the Jackal. This made an impression on me when I was young and when I saw it, and it's made me remember the name Pancho Villa ever since. And I'm ashamed to say that it's, for the past 30 years, has been all I know about Pancho Villa. It's time gets away from you, doesn't it? It's one of those things I've been meaning to look up, but never got around to. Oh, by the way, this is going to be one of those rambling reviews in which I go in a lot of personal digressions and reminiscence. Be forewarned ahead of time. So, Young Indiana Jones was a TV show that premiered in 1992 when I was in middle school. Now, if you remember this, it would be interesting to compare your reminiscence with mine. Let me know in the comments down below what your memories of this were. But my memory is that the show was very heavily promoted, very hyped up when it was first debuting. And it debuted with a 2-hour debut, which was called Young Indiana Jones and the Curse of the Jackal. Now, I'm going to count this as a TV movie because it was kind of a movie, but it was also the pilot episode of a TV show, or it was 2 episodes of a TV show that were put together, because when it was rebroadcast later, it was rebroadcast as 2 separate 1-hour chunks, and you can split this into 2 different parts fairly easily. But at the time it first aired, it aired as one 2-hour block, and there was so much hype surrounding it, and it was treated as kind of like a television event, and it felt like you were almost watching a movie, all the hype surrounding it. I was as hyped up as anybody else, and I remember watching it with my family, and being really wanting to like it, but being disappointed. And I think that is the fatal flaw of this TV show, is it was overhyped and it just couldn't live up to the hype. So let's talk about the things that it could not live up to, perhaps. First thing was, I was young and naive enough that maybe I didn't understand that you have to lower your expectations sometimes. This was not a theatrical release. It was for television. This was not going to be as spectacular or have the same adrenaline thrills as an Indiana Jones movie that was released into theaters. But I didn't fully get that at that age. I just, they were hyping it up as the next Indiana Jones adventure. And I was like, Indiana Jones adventures? All of those are awesome. So this is going to be awesome. And sure, I was young and naive and dumb, but then so was a lot of the target audience for young Indiana Jones was young. And I think that this was aimed at children, or at least at adolescents. Nowadays, of course, that Indiana Jones is a nostalgia property. It's being aimed at people my age, but back then in the 80s and 90s, it was kind of, if not a young kids franchise, at least a adolescent franchise. So the okay, let me back up maybe and discuss the premise behind this series. Red Letter Media recently meaning within the past year, did a video on Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, a rewatch of it when they discussed it. And they pointed out that in the first Indiana Jones movie, Indiana Jones was fighting Nazis. But the original conception of Indiana Jones was not that he was going to be a Nazi fighter. It was going to be that he was going to be an international man of adventure. So he would travel the globe, he'd go to exotic places, and he'd have adventures in all of them. But Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom did not perform as well. So for the third Indiana Jones, they went back to fighting Nazis. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, he's again fighting Nazis. And that's, I guess the latest Indiana Jones movie that came out that shows just how tied his persona has become to Indiana Jones Nazi fighter. That even when it's taking place in the 1960s, they're still having him fight Nazis in hiding, getting a little bit ridiculous at that point. But the Lucas and Spielberg, or I guess primarily Lucas maybe, really wanted to hold on to that idea of Indiana Jones, man of adventure, who goes to a lot of different locations. And you can see that in the Young Indiana Jones series, where he is just all over the globe, meeting tons of historical people and having lots of historical adventures all over. And it's an interesting premise. But again, here come the problems of high expectations. The Indiana Jones movies are not just about going to exotic locations and having adventures, even though that's part of the atmosphere. The Indiana Jones movies are about a dramatic thrill, roughly every 20 minutes, that has you on your edge of the seat. Back in the day, the kind of thrill that only Spielberg could deliver with his amazing action set pieces. And you just can't get that on the small screen with a small screen budget, and particularly with the production schedule. Not to mention, the thing that I think a lot of fans forget, not only about Indiana Jones, but about any nostalgic property, Star Wars or Ghostbusters or any of these nostalgic properties, to a certain extent, lightning can only strike once. Maybe twice if you're incredibly lucky. But you can't, if you have these absolutely amazing movies and you make them into a franchise, it's unrealistic to expect them to be absolutely amazing every time. So, Star Wars, absolutely amazing. The Empire Strikes Back, absolutely amazing. Return of the Jedi, they're running out of ideas a little bit at this point. Every other follow-up in the Star Wars franchise has been trying with varying degrees of success to recover that magic. But they're all trying to imitate this big lightning in a bottle thing that you can never fully recapture. And these people who complain about how the new Star Wars movies have ruined their childhood, etc., I think what they're failing to understand is you had that one absolutely amazing experience, but you can't expect everything to be absolutely amazing. To a certain extent, it's going to drop off into mediocrity. And the same with Indiana Jones. And I think we've seen this with the last couple additions to the franchise. Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull and Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, both of which I've reviewed on this channel. And I think I've made the same point when I was reviewing them. You know, you can't expect them all to be absolutely amazing. That magic strikes very rarely. So, but when I was young, I didn't understand that. If the internet is any indication, a lot of people of my generation still don't seem to understand that. So I was hoping to be thrilled, and I was bored. Now the other thing is the inherent problem with a young Indiana Jones. So there are two young Indiana Jones in this franchise. There's a little kid Indiana Jones. I think he's supposed to be 10. How old is he supposed to be? Somewhere around 10. Little kid, and the one who's supposed to be around 16. No, how old is he? Maybe he's supposed to be around 8. So the 16-year-old Indiana Jones, okay, fair enough. He can ride horses, he can get into fist fights, he can go on adventures. The little kid Indiana Jones is, what are you going to do with that? That's not why people watch the Indiana Jones franchise, especially adolescents or kids. There's sometimes a common misconception that they want to see themselves projected onto the screen, but they want to see an idealized adult hero that they can idealize, look up to. They don't want to see a kid running around, and especially, when you're 13 or 14, you don't want to watch a show about an 8-year-old, maybe. No, I mean, a kid's sidekick, short round, in the Temple of Doom, that's fine. You still get to see Indiana Jones being the manly man and getting into all those fights. But one about just a young kid running around, that's not going to project the wish fulfillment fantasy of watching this man who you could hope to grow up to be like. I think that's why a lot of young boys like these action hero movies, is because there's always a fantasy that you could grow up to be that someday as well. At least that's one theory I've heard. Not to mention, I guess the biggest thing, the most obvious thing, is the character of Indiana Jones is so tied up with Harrison Ford that to get other people to play the role, even as a young Indiana Jones, is pushing it. The whole charisma of him is tied up with Harrison Ford. So what you're left with is something that's calling itself Indiana Jones, but is not comparable at all to the theatrical experience of going to watch Indiana Jones. And I think that's what the big disappointment of this series was. That being said, everybody I know in my middle school, at least all the boys, watched the premiere episode, Young Indiana Jones and the Curse of the Jackal. It was like a TV event. In fact, I remember my high school history teacher was able to build on the fact that we had all seen that to talk a little bit about Pancho Villa. And he talked about the fact that I think he had some story where during one of his travels in Mexico, he had actually met the widow of Pancho Villa, and he was telling us about that. He actually worked in an extra credit question on the history test for that unit. For extra credit, you could get some points talking about how Pancho Villa was in the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. So it was something we had all seen and we could talk about. But then nobody was talking about the subsequent episodes. That was not must-see TV. After the first episode, everybody, I think, decided that they could take it or leave it. I mean, I remember, and I think my attitude was fairly typical. If I happened to turn on the TV and it was on, I might watch some of it, but I would never rearrange my schedule to watch it. And of course, this was back in the days when you had to watch a TV program when it was being broadcast because there was no on-demand streaming or anything like that. And I think the networks also put it at an inconvenient time, which is part of the reason the series didn't do well. But it was not must see TV by any means, or we didn't regard it as such. And so within I think a season and a half, it ended up being canceled. And when I heard it was being canceled, I was surprised. I thought the show was doing well. It had gotten so much hype, I assumed it was just going to go on strong, but it was incredibly expensive to film, and nobody was watching it. I was sorry to see it canceled, but I had not been making a point of watching it, so I guess, yeah, that's why it got canceled, not because of me, but because nobody was making a point of watching it. It's struck me several times in the years since then that it might be an interesting project to go back, get the DVDs or something, and watch the whole series. But that's not what I'm doing today. I'm just going to be talking about the first episode, which I'm treating as a TV movie, Young Indiana Jones and the Curse of the Jackal. So, being that this is the first episode, it introduced both Indiana Jones, who were going to be featured in this. The young Indiana Jones, the very young Indiana Jones, who was age 8, and then the 16-year-old Indiana Jones. And there was a loose connective tissue holding these two threads together, which is that they were both connected to recovering this golden jackal, which had been stolen from an Egyptian pyramid, or an Egyptian tomb, excuse me. So the first 40 minutes or so, 45 minutes, is about the 8-year-old Indiana Jones, in which I had completely forgotten this until I was rewatching it, but he meets T.E. Lawrence, Lawrence of Arabia. So I just got done last week reviewing Lawrence of Arabia, the movie. And as I mentioned in my review, I had been meaning to rewatch that movie for some time because a couple of books on my reading list, where are they? I think I've set them out of reach. But Dune, which is heavily influenced by the story of Lawrence of Arabia, a messianic figure comes to the desert tribes. And also The Odyssey, the edition of which I read last year, was translated by T.E. Lawrence. So both of those had put Lawrence of Arabia back on my radar, and was one of the reasons I rewatched Lawrence of Arabia last week. And now here's Lawrence of Arabia again. He's in the first half of The Curse of the Jackal. So the premise of Young Indiana Jones is it was supposed to be educational. Young Indiana Jones would interact with all these different figures from history and events from history, and the viewer would, the children would learn about history by watching this. I was reading a review of this episode from the New York Times, which pointed out that the history as it's presented in Young Indiana Jones, at least in this first episode, is at least the Egypt part of it, is only interesting if you already know the history. So if you already know who Lawrence of Arabia is, and you already know his story, then you're like, okay, it's Lawrence of Arabia. And they drop in little Easter eggs about his backstory. You know, he says, I've been up in Syria visiting the Crusader castles, which is something that the real Lawrence of Arabia did. At one point, he has a talk with young Indiana Jones, and he admits that he often exaggerates things because he wants to make life more interesting, which is, again, something the real Lawrence of Arabia was accused of doing, is exaggerating a lot of events in his memoirs. So those, if you're familiar with his story, those little Easter eggs are something you're like, I caught that reference. But if you're not familiar with any of that history, then the T.E. Lawrence who's presented in this first 45 minutes is just a really incredibly boring character who just speaks calmly and in platitudes, and seems to be like a source of wisdom, but you as a kid watching this, you would not be inspired to go to the library and read anything up on Lawrence of Arabia. And in fact, like I just said, I had completely forgotten Lawrence of Arabia was even featured in this episode, which shows how little of an impression he made on me. Pancho Villa is much more memorable in this episode, I guess, and I have remembered the Pancho Villa parts 30 years later. The atmosphere of the first 45 minutes is good. Filmed on location, again, this must have been an expensive TV show to shoot, where you get these good, really great shots of the pyramids and the desert and the river. And the creepy atmosphere, the exotic atmosphere of an archaeology dig in Egypt is well done. Although I wonder how much I appreciated that as a kid. I don't know. Again, let me know what your experience is, but I kind of think that as an adult, I appreciate the exotic locations more. Like, I've got more of a knowledge of the world. I've got more of an appreciation for going to interesting places. As a kid, even as an adolescent, I think I was more interested in the action set pieces than I was in going to faraway locations. So, I just give me a good fist fight in some explosions. I don't care if it takes place in Egypt or if it takes place in New York. I think I was more concerned about the choreography and the stunts of the action than I was about the exoticness of it, even though going to exotic locations is part of the hallmark of Indiana Jones. Speaking at least for myself, as a youngster during that era, it was the action, not the locations. But as an adult, I can say it's got a good sense of atmosphere, both with the exoticness of Egypt and also kind of some of the creepiness of going into the tomb and opening up the mummy and stuff like that. So it's got plenty of atmosphere. But what it doesn't have is, the exciting action set pieces. And again, this is something that has Indiana Jones on the title. So, if you're used to like Raiders of the Lost Ark or Temple of Doom, where there's some sort of big action set piece every 20 minutes, and then you're watching this 45 minutes of just people talking and this little kid Indiana Jones going around being educated about ancient Egyptian mummies, it's going to be quite a difference between the expectations and what you're actually going to get. Of course, now that I know what to expect, I enjoy it a lot more. But I think when I first saw this on TV back in the 90s, that's part of the reason it bored me. Then we transfer over to the 16-year-old Indiana Jones, and he's going on the adventure with Pancho Villa. And again, this is the part I remember much better. Now, this section does actually have some good action scenes in it. Um, Taking into account this was done for TV. So, if it was done for the big screen in the cinema, we might judge this by different standards. But as a TV show or a TV movie, this is a pretty impressive budget they're spending on these action scenes, and some good action scenes. That attack they do on the fortress was really exciting and well done, and it must have cost them a fortune to film that, especially for a TV budget. The connective tissue connecting both of these stories together is Indiana Jones finds the golden jackal, which was stolen in the first part of the story. Now, the way he finds it is, relies heavily on coincidence, like him just happening to stumble upon this guy he had once known in Egypt years ago. And then it turns out, spoilers, that the guy who stole it in Egypt just keeps it locked up in his kitchen drawer with a bunch of other treasures that he stole from Egypt. And this is portrayed as a guy who's not living in luxury, but has all these treasures locked up. And you're wondering, well, why did he steal it? I mean, surely he must have stolen it because it was worth a lot of money, along with all these other treasures he got locked up in his kitchen pantry in this poor little house he's living in. Why doesn't he just sell them and make a fortune? What is he doing just keeping all these? I mean, we never get any explanation as to why he stole these artifacts just to lock them up in his kitchen pantry. So he's very much a bad guy without any motivation. He's just purely there to be a bad guy that Indiana Jones can fight against in the last scene. The last fight scene against this guy is decent. Again, considering this is done for television. The sections with Pancha Villa were interesting. Like I said, I'm ashamed to admit it, but for the last 30 years, this has been the only information I've ever had about Pancha Villa. I can't believe I've gone all this time without ever reading a book about him or something like that. But there we are. I am educating myself now. I'm listening to Mike Duncan's history of the Mexican Revolution, but up until now, nothing. I'm in the process of learning a lot from Mike Duncan's podcast, but I'm not quite there yet. So I'm going to resist the temptation to try and comment on the accuracy of the portrayal here, even though I think I may have spotted one or two things which don't line up with Mike Duncan's version. I'm just going to let that go for now. I'm still absorbing the new information. I don't want to try and present myself as an expert. But certainly one of the things you can't help but notice is the rather heavy-handed politics of the screenwriters here, where Pancha Villa and his revolution are portrayed sympathetically at first. This is the reason young Indiana Jones ends up joining up with them. But then they have a very obvious heavy-handed section where Indiana Jones runs into a peasant whose chickens are taken by Pancha Villa's army to appropriated as food. And young Indiana Jones tries to explain, well, this revolution is for you. And the peasant says, they always say that the revolution is for us, but then they always end up taking our chickens. But it goes on for a bit longer than that. It's like a 2-minute speech or something like that, going through the whole history and then talking about how he's never any better off no matter which revolution it is. It's just meet the old boss, same as the new boss, which is a political statement that the show didn't have to make. Yeah, and I'm not convinced that it's true that all revolutions end up leaving the people just the same as they were before. Although, granted, it's true of a lot of revolutions. And there are a lot of revolutions where people end up even worse than before. But is it true of all revolutions? Like the show goes out of its way to hammer in. The New York Times review that I was talking about earlier also points out that this is a little bit odd, but they've theorized that the writers were just worried about getting into political trouble because they had made Pancho Villa into too much of a good guy, so they had to put in this counterweight to it because it was mainstream television. You don't want to get into political controversy. So yeah, I think I'll just leave it there. It's yeah. I'm just going to leave it there. It's interesting. It's an interesting TV show. It was an interesting TV pilot. I would be interested in watching the whole series at one point. Not this year, not anytime soon, but maybe sometime in the future. I might make a project of watching the whole thing and reviewing it. And yeah, it's. I mean, it's a pity that the show didn't last longer, but you know, it lasted a couple seasons. Maybe that's good enough. Not everything has to run on for 10 seasons. And I think it's still surviving in, I think, according to Wikipedia, it's being played on Disney Plus. You can buy the DVDs. I watched this copy off of YouTube. So it's not as good as the theatrical Indiana Jones, but it's an interesting take on trying to do these international historical adventures that is unfortunately saddled with the branding of Indiana Jones, but is not a bad idea. Was not a bad idea entirely.